Welcome to STXT. Our event tonight is Failures in Research. But before we get started, we're going to go through our standard set of slides. This may look a bit familiar. This is what we call our high five slide. This is the STXT board, the people that pour their sweat and tears into each of these events and make them happen for you. So if you see these faces, some people are doing some side initiatives. If you are interested in helping STXT with any of their initiatives, let one of the board members know. We've got plenty of tasks. And for all of you other event organizers of UX events, a lot of the people on here are actually from the companies that are sponsoring, so they're super helpful. Taking on sponsorship and volunteer roles. Speaking of sponsors, we have American Specialty Health, supplying the space that we will be in today.
We're delighted to host you tonight. Before we begin, I'm going to hand it over to our senior talent acquisition artist to say a few words, talk about a few open roles that we have here. But again, hope you enjoy the night, and thank you.
Hi guys. I'm Scott. I'm part of the talent acquisition group. Also Jessica there, raise your hand. Stephanie and Maria. So if you see us later, we'll know why. So as far as American Specialty Health, we are always on the prowl for top talent. Right now we're looking for obviously UX people, but also we're looking for some software QA automation engineers. Within the UX space, we're going through some significant growth. So it's truly a technology renaissance here in American Specialty Health. So we're looking for UX designers, architects, and actually a UX manager. So if you know of anybody in your network that is a great fit for our organization, our culture, we want to hear from you specifically. Right now we're pushing heavy toward mobile applications. So really as we go from B2B to consumer technology, this is really truly, as I mentioned, a technology renaissance. So great time to be part of the organization. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our food sponsor, and Carter at K-Force. Thank you, sir.
Hey guys, just first and foremost, humbled and thankful to be a part of this. Tara does a great job. So what we do is staffing and consulting. So we work with 70% of the Fortune 100. We staffed over 23,000 people last year. We work in all fields from software development, 4 different verticals. I'm specifically on the tech side. I work with a lot of cool companies, both big and small as 5 people at a company, as large as an HP. So we work with a lot of the cooler companies in San Diego, got some great culture. And one of the initiatives for us for 2018 as a corporation is actually to build out the UX. So we're not experts, we're definitely looking to learn from you guys. We'd love to be humbled by a couple of conversations, and as you're on your path to finding your next career, feel free to say hey to me, or actually one of my counterparts, Adam, is a senior recruiter with us as well, so feel free to ping us. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Nam with Sony PlayStation. Just want to let you guys know that we've got a UX manager opening and a couple of UX related positions. So yeah, if you're interested.
Anyone else? All right, on to just when we thought we would start. Okay, hi everyone, Chris Angel. Announcements more for community stuff. San Diego Startup Week is next month. If you have not gotten your tickets yet, please do so. The tickets are going up in price if they haven't already. The other thing, we are evaluating our website. So if you are interested in helping us make it awesome, or even defining what is awesome, Daryl, can you raise your hand? So Daryl and myself, we're going to be working on it with Rodney, who's not here tonight. But feel free to talk to Daryl or me about that. And then the other thing is we got a newsletter that, because Meetup is not very good at helping us connect with our members, so we wanted to be able to connect with you guys. So if you are not getting the emails from us, from Meetup, sign up by emailing sdxd.org@gmail.com. Thank you.
All right, any other announcements? We can move into general announcements if there's no other job openings. All right, going once, going twice. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to our moderators. They're going to introduce the panel today. So we've got James Vinn and Antonio Hasducian. Yes, got it. Who will be moderating today. So if you guys want to step up, you guys are doing the intros, right?
We are. Good, enjoy it.
Hello everyone, and thank you again for coming out to see us. As you know, user research is such a critical aspect of building a killer product. From those initial exploratory sessions all the way through validation testing to make sure people can use it. They all build into these delightful experiences. But if only it was that easy. Inevitably, things happen along the way, and that's one of the purposes for our meeting tonight, is to share some fun stories of failure and how we can learn from them, as well as
making research more approachable, so that if you are not doing it, you start doing it, and if you're already doing it, you do it more often.
So let's introduce our fantastic panelists. Can we give them a hand to start out, please? On the right, we have Hua Loringer, VP at Nielsen Norman Group. Woo! And you know her from all of her trainings and the amazing articles and videos on NielsenNormanGroup.com. She's been at it for over 2 decades and has done consulting for... Is everyone okay? Including Verizon, Samsung, and Disney, just to name a few. So we're very lucky to have her here tonight, and definitely looking forward to some insights.
Next, we have Paul Hong. Paul is Director of Design and Experience at Epicor Software Corp., a global leader in ERP systems, where he leads user research and product design. He has worked in UX design for a wide variety of industries, including big data, biotech, and cybersecurity. He is also former president of SDXD and currently serves on the board of Design Forward Alliance. Paul has an unhealthy love for any form of gummy candy and IPA, usually not at the same time.
And next is Tina Singh from ServiceNow, and she's leading customer insights. And she brings a unique perspective, having been an end user and a product owner before, and now she's doing some amazing things in enterprise. So we're definitely looking forward to your perspectives.
Now we have Deborah Gill Hesselgrave. When Deborah is in fly fishing, Deborah leads heterogeneous teams to develop products, processes, and services that serve the organization and the people who must use them.
Are we ready to hear some failures in research? So to start out, we actually want to ask all the panelists, what's your memory of your first failure in research? How did it make you feel? And what did you learn from it? What did you do different after that?
I have to tell you, I'm on sabbatical, and this is what I decided to agree to. My first memory was my first job coming out of grad school. I was working on military systems, and so it was during Desert Storm. The military needed people who could come in and help, of course, save lives. And so looking around, being a newbie, thinking how wonderful everybody was and how busy they were and how brilliant everyone around me was. I wanted to be brilliant too. So I thought, well, my background is in research. I should do some studies. So I went out and did some studies. I found some soldiers and had them try different systems, and then I put together this fat report, and then I called this meeting because I thought, hey, I want to save them some time and give them data. And nobody showed up. And it was that feeling of being completely deflated. And that was my first realization that being a researcher is not just about doing the research, but it's about the people that you're working with and how you can raise them up and help them out, and really understanding not just the needs of the user, but also the needs of the people that you're working with.
You guys hear it? Yeah. Mine's really easy. I took pictures without asking. I was like, I want to record this. So, right. So obviously that's a no-no. And so the lesson learned is that, a lot of this it's an exercise in trust. And so it's very important to establish that trust and to maintain it. So don't take pictures without asking.
What happened after that?
So they kept a careful eye on me. I think it only led me to certain areas after that point. I mean, it really did affect the research.
I think for me, I kind of blocked out what the failures are, like my first one, but I think when they approached me, I kind of wrote down what some of my failures were, and the one that came to mind was just, I don't even know if it was a failure, but it's like expecting the unexpected is kind of what it was. And one of the things that I've done in past companies, and I do now, is I'll set up kind of user research labs at conferences. And maybe 10 years back, I set up a room in a conference, in Las Vegas. It was a conference room. And you can see here's the photo here. And I was everything was set up. You can see there's pipe and drape, every station had a monitor and a keyboard and microphones. I was doing all the logistics for all the team, the product owners, the researchers. And it was all ready to go. And so then that morning, right before the lab opened, I poured myself a coffee because we had even refreshments for customers and product owners and researchers. And I just sat down and took a sip of coffee, and just took a deep breath. And I heard some rustling. And I go, there's somebody or something here in this room with me. I'm not alone. And all of a sudden, under one of the tables where the tablecloth was, a gentleman crawled out. And I found out later, and he just said, he goes, "Good morning, ma'am," and he walked by me, and I was still sipping my coffee, and I go, "Morning," and he just walked out, and it was not the first participant, but really what it was that apparently in Las Vegas, sometimes homeless people sleep in the hotels, and this guy had crawled in through the ventilation system. And I guess the moral of the story is really it is not a controlled lab setting when you're in a conference area. So, but that was the one that came to mind when I got approached to do this tonight.
Fielding one of these questions last gives me a minute to think about my first failure that I was so many in so many years. But I'll riff off of what Tina said. Expect the unexpected, and you're not always in control. So this harkens us back to several decades ago when I was a product manager for a educational software development company, and I was asked to look into the effectiveness of one of our products, which was a laser disc. Anybody
What's
else?
a laser disc?
First, as interesting as that question will be, Can anybody just show me dimensionally how big a laser disc might be? There we go, look around, yeah, about yay wide. Right, they're ginormous. And I had to schlep those up to the San Francisco Bay Area to some of our target schools, and I was to put these laser discs in the laser disc player, fire up the tube TV, and ask a bunch of kindergartners, first graders, second graders, and third graders in both homogeneous and heterogeneous groupings what they thought of it. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't know what it was I was looking for or what I was going to do with the results. I also had lost sight of the fact that they were 5, 6, 7, 8, a new toy and a new person in the room. So the lesson for this is, and this one will repeat for some of my stories, you need to know your audience. It didn't sink into me that I was dealing with these little popos, that I needed to break them out so I could break them down. There was a mercy that I wasn't found tied up in a closet. So you need to know your audience, you need to know what investigational question you're trying to answer, and you also have to remain pretty darn flexible because you don't know what those users are going to do, especially if they're, well, just about any age. That's just it.
Thank you. So speaking of knowing your audience, we have such a diverse group of industries here in San Diego. There's biotech, there's education, there's health, there's startups, and I noticed a grouping. So Paul and Deborah have both done work with the armed forces, and Paul and Tina are familiar with enterprise companies. So I'd love for both of you to kind of team up and tag team on, I guess, some nuances that people wouldn't know about looking in from the outside regarding doing user research within those fields.
Right, so for enterprise, especially like with ERP systems, like the kind of systems I work with now, one of the tricky things is figuring out if you're doing discovery research, and you want to do discovery research with your actual hands-on users, their needs and their wants and their expertise often tends to be and revolve around your product. Like they don't exist at the company outside of your product. The only reason that they have a job is that they know your product. And so trying to come up with insight about, what else do they need or how could this be different is often really difficult because they just cannot think outside of those bounds.
I would say you have to remember that like two things with enterprise software. Sometimes it's a very specific user. It's somebody that is doing accounts payable and they're doing a repetitive task in the accounts payable department. It might be a payroll specialist that is just running payroll bi-weekly or monthly or semi-monthly. That's their language in their world. And sometimes those users are really hard to find and they're really busy. And one of my sort of personal heroes that I follow on Twitter is somebody named Sam Ladner. I recommend following her and her blog posts. She has a great one on the usability of cursives, and it's a fabulous 2-part blog post. But she has a great sort of, I think there might even be a blog post on it, but they're doing work. And somebody that is in the enterprise, they're focusing on their work as well. It's not something that they necessarily want to do. It's not, something in the consumer space. These people are focusing on doing work, and if you're making their work more difficult or making them less productive, you're impacting their lives. And I think that Sam Ladner actually worked on Microsoft Outlook, and she had some great examples about how the systems that we create can really impact the person and how they feel about their management, their work, and in their lives. So.
with my experience, most recently, supporting a Navy research lab, is very hierarchical in nature. We have captain who runs the research lab, and then we have a civilian executive director. Now, before joining, I thought that finding users would be very easy. It is not. When we are fortunate to get users from the military community, they are often commanded to join us at the tail end of their shift. Play that out. Yeah, their usability or research hostages. They're and in about 20 minutes and a cookie, I gotta go. So that's a hardship and difficulty. It's a theme that runs through the work that I'm doing today. Now that's what I do today, and I know that you kind of had experiences.
I share similar experiences in terms of the challenges of finding participants to give feedback on systems, especially military systems like that. But I think the hardship too also applies to a broader set of organizations. Organizations that tend to be very engineering based, been around for a very long time. Organizations that have practiced waterfall for the last 30 some years, and along comes this frou-frou UX person who tells me I have to do some think out loud thing. So it's a big challenge, as a UX person to come in and really understand the culture and the dynamic of a company like this. The challenge of trying to find the right participant, depending on the culture, that person, whether it be an internal participant, especially internal participants, if you're looking for soldiers, if you're looking for employees of the organizations, the feeling of being judged. And they might participate in a study, is this going to affect my performance review, for example. So as a researcher, it's our responsibility to really understand the challenges that not only the participants face, but also the people that are going to be partnering with you in doing the research. So I spend a lot more time when I work in these organizations to try to understand the dynamic around what's the existing system, and then not come in and then try and impose my philosophy or methods, but try to work with it. And then slowly find allies and slowly kind of convert people into really seeing how useful usability can be. And some environments are much more challenging than others, but it's about starting slowly and gaining momentum over time.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Right now, you all talked about participants and how to find them, and it's difficult in each of your industries. And that's one of the core parts of user research, is vetting and finding the right participants for each of the industries, and each one has difficulties. But what we want to know, just to get into the nitty-gritty of the failures maybe, is if you guys have ever had to deal with, once you already have participants, a participant that maybe was rude or unhelpful, and yeah.
Oh me, let me go.
Turn on our mics fast enough.
This is outside of my current engagement. This was in a different environment. Usability studies, typical recruitment process, had ample participants, properly vetted. It was going like grease through a goose. It was fabulous. It was smooth. It was awesome. And a participant shows up and is full of energy, full of thoughts, full of opinions, following the protocol pretty darn well. I'm not going to actually do what this participant did, but pretend there was a camera over my shoulder and I was the participant. And at a certain point, the participant, knew very full well which company was being represented for that purpose, jumped up from their chair, turned and faced the camera, gave a very broad gesture, and said, "Something you company name.
Oh my goodness, what's the pearls? Looking through and viewing from another side was about to dial 911 for fear that something horrible was about to happen to him. Nothing happened. He just really needed to express his opinion, and I'm back to business. Finished. I don't recall what we did with those results. But it is a story to tell. So again, it goes to theme, be prepared, have a backup plan if something goes really crazily wrong. Make sure you and your team can be in contact. There are a lot of lessons to be learned here, but that's to me one of the most hilarious odd user behavior ones.
Paul, you were grabbing your mic for the story.
I want to tell this story. I owe the universe.
Oh, man. You're ready for
It's a little payback. It's a little payback. I won't name names, but I was at a startup and we were working with an early adopter customer at a very big social media company. And so he was a very technical person in a very technical field, in a very esoteric field. And we had an opportunity to talk to him. So I had an opportunity to do some user research with him. And so I jumped at it. So I introduced myself, and I said, I'm a UX designer here. And he said, oh, UX, right. Just like that. And so I thought, okay, well, we'll work through that. He obviously doesn't have the highest opinion of UX designers, but we can work with that. So I proceeded just to, do a usual kind of thing, like day in the life walkthrough, like what do you do when you first come in? And his answer, and I'm not making this up, to every question was use your imagination. He just said, use your imagination. So at first I was just like, well, I imagine when you first come in, if you don't have some like red hot fires to put out, you're probably looking through your email because you have overseas teams that have been sending you stuff. He's like, good guess. And I was like, and he goes, use your imagination. So I just fast forward, right? That was his answer to everything, except when he actually changed it up a little bit to say, if you have to ask that question, you shouldn't be working in this industry. So the customer's always right when you're a startup, right? You're one of our few customers. So, you finish out the session. You say, thank you very much. And we were actually riffing on this, like, how do you say thank you, but not reinforce them and reward them for being so awful? So you're like, that was really interesting, right? Or thank you for the feedback. And so the moral of the story is this: is that as researchers, you want so badly because there are such rare opportunities for research in a lot of situations. So you're just like, I'll just do it. I'll do whatever it takes. There are just some times when you just cut your losses. Like this person, I never talked to them again. There's no reason to. Right? And so sometimes it's them, it's not you.
I'm just curious, just by the question, is this bad user behavior? Is that a big thing in research? Like, do you guys encounter that quite a bit? Yes. Yeah?
Would anyone like to share an anecdote? We may or may not have a book.
I think the more amusing one was when I was mentoring a younger researcher, and I had to explain to the younger researcher that they could not hit the participants when they weren't being cooperative. And I've done testing for enterprise software where the participant who came in had the same name as somebody who was the tennis instructor. And so testing my enterprise software with a highly specific use cases and tasks as a tennis instructor going through these tasks. And you need to find out, in a very friendly way, what exactly are you doing here since you're clearly not this participant? And then you can cycle back around with the recruiter to kind of realize, oh, this was where the process happened. But not let it affect the session at all and continue going through another withdrawal. So those are my two favorite problems.
Cool, thanks for sharing. And we literally have a book about UX for you since you shared a story with the audience. So I guess my next question is for the audience. Who's a non-researcher who sat in on a design research session? We're going to show hands. Nice. Thanks, Marta. We all know that conducting the research itself is half or even less of the battle. It's getting your team to understand your users with the same depth of knowledge and same insights that you have. And how do we do that? One of the ways is having people sit in on your sessions. But we got to keep in mind, they don't know what we know, and even if you provide them with guidelines, things are bound to go wrong. So I think we all love to hear some stories about a time, not the participant, but a team member misbehaved during a session.
So I am a big advocate for paper prototype testing. And so I have a lot of fun stories with paper prototyping, but this one in particular, I was working with a fabulous, fantastic designer. And for this particular session, because we had so many screens and moving parts, I really needed him to be part of the session so that he can, show the user, the participant, the right screens at the right time and give the right feedback. But my only rule to him was that he had to be quiet through the whole session. In order to suspend people's disbelief, you have to be quiet. So when the person comes in, I say, this is Matt. He's usually very friendly and gregarious, but for this particular session, he's the computer, so don't be quiet most of the time. So I just set the stage for that. Well, Matt, it's like, I can't do it. I cannot do it. I cannot do this. I can't sit still. I can't be quiet. But I had no choice. He was the only one that I had. And so Matt was really stressed out about this new role that he had for this particular study. So the night before, he organized everything in folders. Like the screens, the order of the screens, the things he's going to show, his assets. He had a side table with all of his Post-its and all of these little cutouts, everything. He was ready, right? And so when the participant did something right, he was like, he had the screen ready. He was like, And then when the participant pointed to something wrong or did something that he wasn't expecting, he'd be, this was such an awkward session. So we had a little chat afterwards, poker face. But yeah, so that's a story I have about when you're conducting a study like paper prototyping, and it is going to feel unnatural. If there's anything that you're doing in a study that's unnatural, you have cameras, you have a one-way mirror, that's unnatural. You sitting next to the participant is unnatural. So if there's anything like that that might be causing your participants to wonder, what the heck did I sign up for? What's going on? Demystify it. Address it right at the beginning. Yeah, that's a one-way mirror. My colleagues are behind that mirror. Yes, that's the camera there. We're going to be recording the session. We have paper prototypes here, and sometimes things don't work because we don't have everything prepared. So if that happens, don't worry. We'll take care of it. Or sometimes Matt and I might have to step outside of the room for a moment. It's part of the process. And that really just kind of eases people into that mindset.
What I do is because there's something that as a researcher you're kind of used to, like when somebody says, does this button do this? Or, they'll just go, oh, is this available here? And you just kind of let those questions in there, thinking aloud, go. Sometimes you answer it, sometimes you don't. And, that's part of the think aloud methodology. And I think product owners, they're more tending to have solutions. And they want to answer those questions. And they created that baby, and they're marketing it too, so they want to continue that conversation. So I think just like millions of times, not millions of times, at least multiple times, product owners will interject when you have that. But to stop it, what I do is when I create the calendar invite, I have one for the participant and I have one for the stakeholders that are going to attend. I have instructions in there about what their protocol is. And I think that's something valuable, that if you're doing user research, create 2 calendar invites, one for your participant, one for your stakeholders that are attending, and put the instructions for them in there. Write it out that if you have questions, contact me on Slack or on my cell phone. Like, put what their protocol is. It's just one safeguard, so they don't interject when those questions come, and save your questions for the end. So.
I've got a quick story about that.
Please.
Kind of along the same line. So I'll cut to the punchline first, which is nobody else should be in the room except the moderator and the participant. Maybe a note taker if you're not recording, but that's it. Like, don't ever give it. And so what happened one time, I had a dev lead who just insisted they just really wanted to be in. They wanted to be in. Please, 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 let me in. No, we never do that. No, just let me in. All right, you have to be absolutely quiet, like fly on the wall. So we start going, and every time the participant does something that this person, thought was easy or disagreed with, there was a sigh. But it sounded like this. And it made the participant freeze, and they kind of looked. And from that point on, every time, there's a little slide, and it just totally threw the participant off. So, never ever. Don't let them in.
I don't have that.
Oh, really?
I don't. I actually like to let people in. So a lot of the studies that we do at MNG are not in the formal usability lab. So we don't have that extra room where we could position our clients or have other observers be on the other side because of budget reasons. So sometimes we'll just use people's conference rooms, or we get a hotel room that's cheaper than renting a lab. So that poses that question of what do we do with observers, because we want our clients to feel part of the process and also observe the usability sessions, because there's nothing more powerful than watching it versus reading a boring report. If they can just see it for themselves and be there to be part of that discussion at the end of each session, we find that to be so powerful. And so one way we've done this, and it's been very successful, is you're right, is like, you're the facilitator, you should be the one communicating with the participant, because when you have so many people trying to speak to the participant, it was very overwhelming. But what we tend to do is try to get a bigger boardroom and have our observers, and sometimes I'll have maybe 3 observers on the other end of the table and have an external monitor where they could see the screen that's happening on the other side of the table where I'm facilitating the session. And we go over ground rules in the beginning with the observers, like, hey guys, you're in here, I'm glad you're here, we'll have a chance to chat at the end, but please, while you're here, try to be quiet. So we go all these rules. But I think the thing that that we've done that's been really helpful is to let people know that at the end of the session, we're gonna allow 10 minutes. So I'm gonna say 10 minutes at the end of the session for them to ask some questions. And so that really helped kind of release some of that tension people have during the session and wanting to jump in, so that I can save those questions in the end. And sometimes, people ask inappropriate questions. So now that you've used it, will you buy it? Yeah. Like, you buy this, right? And so that becomes a teachable moment where we have, after the session, I'm with my team still, I'm like, hey guys, what did you think of that session? What did you see? And, great questions we had at the end, but let's try next time, why don't we try to rephrase some of these questions? And, and over time, people get it, and they become just kind of more part of that cohesive feeling. So I really like to bring my clients into the room with me. Haven't had too many problems.
Just jinx yourself.
Yeah, and I think I also leave the time at the end. That's what I alluded to when I create the calendar invite. And oftentimes it goes to, these people are already they're not only users, they're customers. And sometimes they have a couple of questions that they are associated or in some way adjacent to what we're designing. And the product owners can say, well, actually, that's configurable, you can do this. And it kind of is good because they get something out of it as well. So, and a great piece of advice or a saying that an ex-manager once had was, you really want them to attend. And he would always say, if you can, you want your stakeholders to attend. He always said, if you can attend one session, you can attend two. And that's what I always say to my stakeholders. Like, if you can make it to one, make it to two, because then they're not making assumptions on one user. And so I think you want them to attend, so it's helping the whole process if they attend in some manner and participate.
So it sounds like you talked about a lot of problems that can arise within the research when you're conducting it, and there's preparation that goes into it, right? So you're prepping your participants, you're prepping your staff if you're bringing to them, but you're also prepping the room, and there's all these tools that you may perform research with. So having said all the ways you prepare, and even when you do it and you think you've checked all your bases, what's something that goes wrong, or you have a story when you thought you had all your bases covered and then something failed?
Well, just, if you're testing a live system, like maybe it's a prototype or a beta, somebody's going to mess with it during the test, guaranteed. They're going to update it, they're going to take it down, they're going to add stuff. Guaranteed. So have a backup plan, right? Have paper mock-up, have your mock-ups ready, always have that.
Similar to that, traveling to perform usability tests at client sites, and I'm going to the East Coast, and the dev team is on the West Coast, and I'm flying on the weekend. They worked on the weekend, and my first test is on Monday. And I fire up the software to go through our protocol, and there's a whole new module there. So then it goes to walking it back. Well, this is new. We're not going to do that. So all of your behaviors, just know that this isn't there. And trying to get some good data from the participants after Deb has done what they thought was a wonderful thing, giving me more features to look into. But since I hadn't learned about them, tested them myself, there was nothing I could do about it. So when things go wrong, yes, or more recently, the recording material, the software that we use decided to go toes up on us. And everybody had to scramble and go old school. We had no more recording devices whatsoever, so we were doing a lot of listening and writing and adding observers from the research team into the testing space, even though we didn't have our tools running for us anymore. So stuff happens.
I might be dating myself with this example or this tool that I use, but I think you can bring it if you have a visual. This is maybe 10, 15 years ago, but for those of you that don't know, this is an old school eye tracker. This is when I worked at Oracle, and we had a usability lab, and we were doing eye tracking. And it wasn't as easy to calibrate the eyes to make sure that the system was set up for that specific user. There was one particular person that came in, and like Deborah said, they come in at the end of the day, after their work day, the guy was already pretty tired, and he would put his chin in the rest thing, and we would calibrate him, and we'd go back, and we'd get halfway through a task, and things were calibrated. And we must have did it 5 or 6 times, even more. And finally, what we decided to do is we went in and just got great news. We actually got all the data we need. And he goes, I get my gift card already? And we go, yes. But it was like, we just cut it short. But it's, eye tracking is a lot easier now. So, but yeah.
of this a story, but what I learned through the years in terms of heavy planning. When I first started in the field, I had test plans that were pages long. What exactly am I going to tell the participant? What exactly is the task? I'm going to read it to them out loud. It's going to be, and I'm going to perform the exact same study for every session. And the tasks are be in this particular order. I've got 20 tasks, and they're going to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And I've worked on this with my client, and these are the tasks that they've agreed to, and these are the questions that they want to ask. And over the years, I've found that is just really not the right approach to doing research. What happens is that you get so caught up in the plan, and you forget about what the goal is of the study. So long as you understand the goal of the study, like what is it that you're trying to answer for yourself, but also for your team? If you know what that is, you'll know what to ask as things come up organically in the session. So it's good to plan so you know what the goal is, and have a few key tasks for people to perform, but change it up. Change it up as things happen, as things unfold. If people are going through your website and they mention something, they just kind of think about it on their own. Go down that path, explore that a little bit. And just sticking to the script will not give you that rich, deep data that you want. And so heavy planning is not what I recommend. I recommend really understanding the goal of this research and also the problem that you're trying to solve with that. And when you know that and your team knows what that is and it's clearly defined, research becomes so fun. It's not mechanical. It just becomes this very fluid conversation, this activity that you have, and this experience that you have with your users, and your clients. It becomes wonderful. So plan, but deviate from the plan. You're gonna need to.
I might just add that there's a great blog post on Medium that advocates don't do user interviews, have conversations. Yeah. And it's much more natural when you're talking to the user. Obviously, if you're just starting out your career, I think it's good to have a bit of a protocol so you know that. But if you're having those conversations, just like you were saying, you're not in this box, and you're going to get those aha moments that are over there. Like that's where innovation might happen. Or it's something that, where I think we have the term before, expect the unexpected. You will get it if you're having the conversation instead. And a trick that I use too is, if I want to make sure that most of those goals and research are addressed, I might have a list of themes. And they're just like, there might be 5 or 6 boxes, but make sure I talk about this, and then I know that each of those themes are addressed at some point during the conversation.
Beautifully said, and a lot of great points there. There's also a book called Just Enough Research, which I think embodies the spirit of all that's discussed. But speaking of planning enough, but not too much, design sprints are really hot right now. Jake Knapp has got the book, it looks really flashy, and I'm gonna say it's a buzzword. How many people are operating in organizations that use design sprints? Yeah, pretty good chunk. So I guess my question is, what are things that could potentially go wrong when you're running too fast? And how can you mitigate those?
What's a design sprint?
A design sprint is this concept of rapid prototyping and ideation. And if you Google it, there's some really flashy case studies with Blue Bottle. But the idea is you get a hypothesis about a user, the team builds a low-fidelity prototype, and then you get out there and do some guerrilla research. And by the end of the week, you can kind of inform all the stakeholders whether or not that's something that's worthwhile to move forward with.
In my organization, one of the downsides to design sprints is they become very quickly design finals. Mm-hmm. Once they see our stakeholders, our development teams, because of our industry silo, the military, they believe it's done. They're still nascent participants in this notion of user research and ideation, iteration, design, lather, rinse, repeat. So we'll go into a design sprint, we'll come up with a cocktail napkin, a high fidelity paper prototype, something in between, the lot in between a napkin drawing and high fidelity paper prototype. And they'll go, that's it, let's code it up. And the next thing you know, you've got a dev team working on that. And you're like, wait, no, that's not how any of this works. We don't know what's behind these interactions. We don't know if this is a repeatable task that we're going to want to model in different circumstances. This was just what we did in our sprint, which is typically, for us it's 9 days. It's going 2 weeks, but it's 9 days. From start to review. That's a downside to the design sprints for me in my organization now.
I guess I start making sounds first. Right, right, just. This is me recording. I'm a little on the fence about the value of design sprints in certain scenarios, right? So design sprints, like if you read the book, it's all about sort of startups, right? Which makes perfect sense, right? You're trying to create a new experience, figure out what that should look like. If you're working with, an existing system, like a system like the system that I work on, that are literally pieces of that code that are over 20 years old, but they want to try design sprints, right? Because they've been stuck. We just can't get past this one thing. We've been trying to fix it forever. Can't do it. Let's do a design sprint. So we do, and I've done that. I've facilitated them, and I feel like it did work because it got us a great solution. Brought people to the table that aren't really interested, that didn't really have that grounding in design thinking. But this is a really good experience for them. But we could have done that without the design sprint. We could have done it in a few days rather than a full 5-day rigorous thing. Fly everything to a single and do that straight. There are other methods, right? Like fascinating design studio, design charrettes, like really quick kind of ideation things where you can cut out some of the steps. You would have gotten the same results. So, yeah, kind of on the fence depending on the situation.
And I'd say here, especially when you're working with a legacy product, we're trying to take something that's 30 or more years old and just attempting to bring it to this century, let alone this decade. So, yes, very much so, maybe not a design sprint in my environment, not all the time.
Please. I have an example too. It's a little, I know I've got a great story. But this one I was doing some IA testing and QA testing, and I was doing it on version 8 of the latest as we were doing it. We were moving really rapidly, there was a really fast product push, and I was doing weekly testing at this point, getting the findings out, high level Friday, more in depth on Monday, start planning up for the next topic, and keep on rinse, repeat, moving fastly to stick to that super fast deadline. And the morning of my testing session, I'm sitting in at 6:15, like from, very much so not wanting to be there, wanting to speak in just a little bit for an all hands meeting. Now this all hands meeting, they're showing a new direction that we want to go in. And on there I see version 12 of the edit. Half an hour later, I'm supposed to be testing version 8 with a whole day's worth of participants and more lined up for the next morning. And my VP of product is sitting right next to me. And I just was like, and, the whole internet super mad, somebody's wrong on the keyboard thing, right? Immediately taking screenshots, immediately reaching out to people. Somebody sent me and saying, like, we're doing it in tree draft, we can move it, I can switch it up right now as we're in the middle of the meeting, but you need to send me immediately. Doing that, sending it out. Luckily, he happened to have that version because they briefed him. But if he hadn't been able to send it over immediately, like, I would have had to do screenshots and by screenshots change it in the middle of the all hands the day of for 3 or 4 different versions later than I was actually sent to test, that everybody in the room knew I was sent to test, and people were sent to come in and view remotely with Mariah, and not even just in the office, like people were remotely viewing it because it was a really fast, rapid design turnaround. So that was like a mild heart attack, and 6 in the morning, I don't panic, it's freezing out so hard, but it luckily went through and worked out okay, but that was just another incident of like, oh my god, this did not happen the way that I was going to.
Sure. So believe it or not, we've only got about 10 minutes left. So I do want to get into fighting the good fight, which is dealing with stakeholders. So who here has gotten in a heated discussion with their stakeholders? And pop quiz, Nielsen Norman Group says, what is the magic number for design research, qualitative research?
5.
That's right, 5. And inevitably you get, what are you going to do with 5 people? So I would love to hear about how you push back when your stakeholders say that wasn't enough research, or just in general, if they don't agree with your recommendations or your findings.
Yeah, this is a common one, especially when we're working with new clients. And of course, we want to have their input in the research process because we want their buy-in right from the beginning. And so it's very common for us when we work with new clients that they request a large sample size for the study. They want to do it in all of these countries, all these like East Coast, West Coast, South, North, middle, a little bit of the middle, and they have all the matrix of all the little. And so you're looking at like, I think you'll need 5, and they just like, what? So we get situations like that. So we explain to them in terms of like why we would recommend a smaller sample size, and mainly it's feasibility. Like if we had all the time and all the budget in the world, sure, we'll do it. We'll go all these places, but you guys don't have all the budget and you don't have all the time. And we do a big study. By the time we publish the results, your competitors have already moved on. And so we want to have that discussion with them about prioritizing. So how are you going to use, best use your budget? And usually we explain it, okay, so we have this budget, we have this amount of time, this is what I recommend. We break it up into smaller studies. So we can get to the various groups that you're talking about, but why don't we start with this group and then build upon our research so we don't put all of our eggs into one basket? Why don't we do that? And then you guys come along with us, and then we modify and be flexible with our test plan as we go. So we visit the first group and go, wow, we have this aha moment that says, wow, we just totally neglected this other group. We should add them to our list. So that changes our plans, but we're willing to pivot as we go. That's typically how we like to explain how people could use a budget. Now, sometimes our clients will really push back and go, you know what, that 6 users, I'm not really quite comfortable. Why don't we do 24? I got the money, I got the time. So we book the lab, and we book a whole week in the lab, and we'll be there from morning to night. But what usually happens is the first 2 days, our clients are excited. Oh my God, that's so amazing. I didn't know people did that. Oh my God, that's awesome. The third day, what are they doing? They're on the phone. They're checking their email. They're making travel arrangements to go home. Fourth day, we're there by ourselves, finishing the last few sessions. And this is a learning experience, for our clients. So sometimes we do things that's not optimal because we want people to feel heard. And once they experience that, then the next conversation would be, yeah, let's do something else for the next round. So for us, it's not just digging our heels and saying, we've got proof, I'm telling you, we're the best. Just listen to us. We don't do that. It's more about this is what we recommend, and let's see how we can work this to make it work. And it's that relationship and that trust that we build over time, and that gets the client to the point where they go, what? You're saying just do 1 user session and then change the design? I said, yes. For this particular situation, I just need 1 participant. And they go, okay. But that takes time, that takes trust and building that.
Yeah, I find when you work in enterprise companies, especially the data scientists that are employed there, that the numbers and the data have real importance. And they'll always want a survey and, make sure you're equipped with the answer. The surveys will tell you what. Remember that surveys tell you what, but it's never going to tell you why. It's going to give you some information, but it's never going to be why users are doing something. And, something that I do, there's to be flexible because you also want to have that engagement with your stakeholders. But oftentimes what I'll do when there's a readout or a study, we will also research some of the data. So thankfully at ServiceNow, there's a lot of data on our customers. And recently there was a dashboard that one of the teams created, and they had this really visual dashboard with priority and all these things for incidents, which is basically customer support tickets. And we actually went into the data and we realized that on average there's 3 or 4 of them and open at any one time. Why would you create this elaborate visual that doesn't actually have the details of three or 4 items? And so we used the data actually to convince them that this visual design actually wasn't the right direction to go into. So use data well and find the right situations to use it. So.
Great, and Antonio, I think you and me had asked a lot of questions today.
Right, so we asked our panelists if they had a particularly hard question or a question they wanted to ask to their fellow panelists. So whoever wants to take on the first step.
I'll ask the first question. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of experience working on enterprise and B2B types of products. I think one of the biggest challenges in this space is just really finding the right participant, recruiting. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I've actually, in previous jobs, I was the not only UX research, but customer engagement. And there, you have to kind of go through all these sort of tunnels and channels to find users. And sometimes, even at ServiceNow, I have to go through the salesperson that will introduce me to the IT person that will introduce me to the HR person that will introduce me to the person sending out communication in the HR department. Like, you have to go through all these channels, but it's really about building relationships, and it's not necessarily the relationships with the user, but the people that are above the user or connected to the user. So that's certainly, I find that more valuable than spending like $1,000 on a LinkedIn ad. Like, it is really that relationship building throughout your network in your company. That's really how it is. And I'm also a real advocate of going where the users are. So going to those user conferences where they will be to make those relationships. Like, if I've met somebody in person at a conference, they are more likely to introduce me to their HR colleague. And it's that face-to-face. So a lot of it is, I think a big part, in my opinion, of user research is that relationship building with people, like your stakeholders, but also your users and the people adjacent to your user.
I'd like some advice from my co-panelists. We have great difficulty getting actual users because they're in uniform active duty sort of country. What are your thoughts on proxy users, and how would you define a proxy user?
I think it just kind of depends on what you're testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's a fairly common workflow that it says be all of that military, then you can probably find people with similar challenges who will probably give you decent feedback. I've never worked with military, but I imagine they're retired military that fulfill those roles as well. They know all the jargon, they know the hierarchy, the weirdness that comes with it, so they're probably
Are you talking about military personnel? Like, you need them to be in the battlefield, in that stressful environment to.
We are controlled by an IRB, so no, I don't want to run that. Subject research, do not want that paperwork. No, people who are active duty military, that specialization, we're building an application to support their job to execute that series of tasks that's within their specialization. And they're often not available, or their chain of command will release them to us, otherwise we get the guidance waiting till it's cooking.
I think going back to what your recommendation is to kind of form the alliances and the connections and goes back to that. But since you brought up the
making friends with companies.
making friends, it really is. But you were talking about the proxy users. So there are situations where you don't have a choice, and so having someone who has some experience and is somewhat representative of the target user is better than not doing any research at all. But I would say, like, I've been really careful, when you are using proxy users, because you could be going down the wrong path fairly easily. And I'll give you an example. When we do our studies with eye tracking, we see this clear pattern when people are researching, say, general medical conditions or reading articles or whatnot. There's a pattern that we see, in eye tracking. But then when we do some very specialized studies, the eye tracking is completely, the pattern changes depending on the situation and the person. And I'll give you some examples. Like, for example, we did a study with a hospital, and it was for recruiting, it was information for parents or caregivers of children who have cancer. So imagine if we had, a proxy user, like, hey, you're a parent, why don't you come in now, pretend like your child, it just doesn't, it's not the same. So we had to go through the extra layers and the extra work of trying to find caregivers who were in this situation. And it was tough. Because you imagine if you're a parent and you have this child, you don't have time to participate in the study. So we had to contact the physicians and nurses and healthcare providers to help us explain to the patients why it was important to do this research. But I tell you, we're sitting there doing the research and we see parents pour over the same page over and over and over again, like reading things word for word. Imagine their emotional state. They're reading things over and over because they're forgetting things. And this information is critical, and this is the only place they can have it. So, if we didn't do studies with the right person, we wouldn't get the right data. Or another example is a site where we did medications for pets. So we didn't just recruit pet owners or people who love pets. We had to recruit people who had pets with medical conditions that were taking medication. So we had them go on this website, and our client was saying, we don't know why people are leaving the checkout process. They're selecting the medication, and they're leaving the checkout. So in the usability session, we observed people leaving at this one particular spot. People add their medication to the cart. They're ready to check out, and this pop-up appears. It says, hey, we noticed that you added this prescription. We have a generic version. Would you like to buy a cheaper version? And so this website is trying to do something nice, benevolent for the customer. But what do these customers do? They stop and they go, let me take a look at this pill. What are the ingredients in this generic version? Is it the same? What's the shape of this pill? Is it oblong or round? Because my cat only likes oblong. What's the flavor? Is it liver or chicken? Right? I'm going to have to check with my vet now. So can you imagine, because we are testing with the target, the actual users, we're getting these behaviors. We had this one participant. We heard him come down the street to park in front of our building. He had a Harley motorcycle. I'm like, that's our participant. It says here he has a cat. Why he has a cat? He comes in with his leather jacket, his boots, right? He's sitting there like, he doesn't look like a cat owner. So he's going through the whole process, and all of a sudden he goes, you want to see my cat? It's on his wallet, I'm like, okay, so this is where he's not focused on his cats, right? So as a facilitator, you're like, oh, you gotta get him back. but he wants to share with you his cats. It's like these are the types of people you want to be sitting in the chair and making sure that your recruitment screener is like dead on in terms of the user traits. So yeah, so there are many times when we have to use proxy users in really just difficult situations. But when you can, go the extra mile to make sure you get the right users, and you'll get just that extra level of detail that will make your findings just be bold.
That's a great story. Thanks, Juan. Yeah, definitely. Maybe that's the case of not judging a book by its cover. Okay, well, so we're almost at the end of our panel, but we wanted to ask one last question. All of these questions were looking back on everybody's experience, which has summed up decades of experience with all our panelists. So for this question, we want to look forward, and with what you've learned, what's a trend that you see us research doing in the next year or in the next 5 years?
I can start. I've kind of seen that prototyping is kind of changing in the enterprise with platforms. That sometimes a team can prototype as quickly on the platform as somebody could, end up like in a prototyping tool. And the platforms also have these design systems that are already, have all the usability defined in it. And I'm hoping, and I think the real value comes that research will be more discovery-based and finding where the innovation can happen in the products. So, I think it's going to be, I kind of sometimes have a thought that research and product strategy hopefully at some point will merge and be like one discipline. So.
If it's not happening already, I think the traditional research report is going away, at least with in-house teams, because those things go stale. And so, the whole movement toward lean research is great, right? It's like right there in real time, come up with your patterns, come up with your findings. The findings should be definitive findings that actually meet the goal of research. So if it's to improve the prototype, if it's to improve the product, we should have those findings immediately. The team that's building the product, hopefully they're watching it, they already go, we don't have to write a report. We don't have to send it out there.
I see that research, and good research, is not being reactive, but being proactive. And I agree with you in terms of having research being part of this strategy. What is a good researcher? A good researcher doesn't just sit around and wait for someone to say, hey, can you do a study for me? Wait for these research requests. We're in there. We're in there with the product team. We're in there during the strategy discussions. We're not just doing studies and then reporting findings. Here you go, here's your reporter. Here, come listen to my findings. It's being part of that discussion, being part of and helping the team that drive towards success. So it's a leadership role, really.
I'm seeing a very positive change in my environment, and it just now occurred to me. A lot of people who are hardcore engineers, scientists like biochemists, those kinds of scientists, are actually coming to us, asking us to sit with them or to counsel them or mentor them in their quotes, user engagements. So if they're going to write a proposal for some funding, they want us in the room with them when they're talking to the subject matter experts to help facilitate that human-to-human connection. So it's strikingly odd because several years ago it was like, human factors, user research. We'll just do that when we field it and they take the seed of the product. Now they're saying, will you come and actually talk with this person so I can decide if my idea holds any water? So that tells me there's been, in about a decade, a sea change in the acceptance of what we do for a living by people who at one time may have been orthogonal to us. terms of how we approach these kinds of problems and questions. Yay, all of you.
I was just gonna say, James, the book that my friend wrote here, that I don't know if we're gonna raffle off, it is actually, his philosophy of the book, it is more for non-researchers on how they should do research. But there's a lot of real nuggets in there for researchers. But it's really, his thing was there's so many method books, but how do you actually get people that aren't researchers to do good research?
Wonderful. We hope you all found value in the discussion tonight. So let's start off by thanking our amazing panelists. Before going on with the thank you, is there anything anyone would like to plug while we're wrapping up?
I would love to plug Designing Women San Diego. You please follow us on Twitter and also Designing Women San Diego, the website. But we throw quarterly events, and we're building a board, so we might have more events, but it's really to be an advocate for women. We like to have women speakers, but I met James there actually the last time, so it's open to everyone. But it's a great organization, and we try to keep our events smaller, typically 30, 40 people, but we're sharing anything along design thinking, how to conduct workshops, and just a great way to meet others in our community in a smaller setting.
Brilliant. And then I would also like to, of course, thank our venue sponsor, American Specialty Health, K-Force for the yummy food and drink. And all of you guys for staying this whole time. I didn't see that any phones and laptops, and I assume you were taking notes and pictures of us. So, thanks again, everyone.
One more thing, information we brought to you, we have about 20 minutes, yeah, till 9.
Yeah.